Hey y'all, Melissa with you today, and I am a notoriously light packer. Like, I don't just pack carry-on, I pack the carry-on that goes under the seat for a 2 or 3 day trip. One of the ways that I do this is I use something called packing cubes, and so today I'm going to show you how to make a packing cube. So this is a packing cube. It's pretty much like a very lightweight miniature suitcase. So you can see it unzips all the way, and then I put all the things I want to pack in here, usually my clothing, but sometimes I can put other things in here. And then it zips shut. And because of the way we're going to construct this today, the top is see-through, so you can see what you've packed. I have a link in the description here that's going to have your supplies, what size to cut things. This is all made out of rectangles and a zipper. And I'm going to let you go take a second, get that link, get your materials together, and then meet me back at the camera and I will show you how to make your own packing cubes. Let's go through the supplies we should have. I'm using ripstop nylon for the bottom and the side of the case. I'm using this because it's extremely lightweight. It is water resistant, so if you want to use your packing cube as a wet bag, it'll help keep water out of the rest of your luggage. Say like you go to the beach and you put a damp swimsuit in there. It's also fray resistant, much more so than other types of nylon, so that makes it easier when you don't have to finish the edges. So I've got my sides, my zipper tab, my bottom of the case, and then for the top of the case, I'm actually using this mesh fabric that I'm applying fusible vinyl to. So let's talk about this vinyl a little more. It comes in a roll like this, and the roll is backed with paper, and what you do is after you have it cut to size, you take a corner and you separate the paper and the vinyl. And then let me pull my ironing board over here and I'll show you how this goes on. So you'll notice I covered my ironing board with some muslin scraps here, and that is because I didn't want the vinyl going through the mesh, the little holes there, to stick to my ironing board. So I put some muslin down as a press cloth. And then what you do is you pull the paper and the vinyl apart, and the vinyl is a little bit sticky on one side, so you press that sticky side onto your fabric, and then you use the paper as a press cloth, and you use the iron and you press until the vinyl is all adhered to your fabric, and then you will pull it up off of your fabric, and you can see that, I think you can see, hopefully in the light, that it's got kind of a sheen, but it's still see-through, so I can see what I've put in my packing cube. Like, say if I have more than one, this way I can tell which is which. And because it's vinyl, it's still water resistant like the ripstop nylon, so it still functions for a wet bag. One other thing I'll note on here, that with the dimensions that I gave you to cut, the vinyl won't go all the way to the edges here, so that's okay, because those are going to end up in the seam allowances anyways if you center the vinyl between the two edges of the fabric. So you'll notice that there are rounded corners on the bottom here of my base, and the way you do that, and I actually need to do it to the mesh in a second too, but you just fold your fabric in half and in half, and then you use scissors and you just cut a rounded edge on that outside corner there. So here, let's do it with the mesh. Fold it in half so that I've matched all the corners. I'm going to use my top here that I've already cut as a template, and I'm just going to round that corner off. So there we go. Now I'm actually gonna not start with those pieces. I will be starting with the zipper and the zipper tabs and the side piece. All right, so what we want to do is I want to start by placing the zipper right sides together, about ½ inch away from one edge of my side piece, and I'm just gonna put a clip there to hold it in place for now, because I actually want to add something here, which is this little piece, my one zipper tab. I want to fold one edge to the wrong side, and then I want this to be right where the zipper stops there. I'm going to line those up together. That is where I'm going to put my clip. What that will do is then when I flip this to the right side, you can see that that way the fabric goes all the way to the zipper and it has a folded edge instead of an unfinished edge. So now that I've got that in place, I'm just going to align the edges of my zipper, and every so often I will add a clip. Now down on the other end, you will notice my zipper has a different kind of pull, and this pull goes all the way to the end. Now if you got a zipper that doesn't separate, which that's fine to use for this project, you'll just have the end of your zipper here. But what you want to do then is take your other zipper tab and you want it to match the end of your zipper and be clipped in place. And again with that folded edge, just like I did earlier. Now I'm going to use a zipper foot and I'm going to stitch all down this edge, right sides together. When you get to this part here, it works better if you unzip and then, you know, keep the edges lined up, stitch to about the clip area. I actually need to unzip further. Stitch to about the clip and then pause and then zip it up so this pull is out of your way and continue stitching along. As far as stitching ripstop nylon, you don't actually need to do a lot of things different than using normal fabric. You might want to increase your presser foot tension or pressure. That is usually a knob on the very back of your machine, and you want to make that a bigger number because this is such thin fabric. Sometimes you need that extra pressure on the presser foot to pull it through as you're sewing. One clue you might need to adjust your pressure is if you're getting a lot of really tiny little stitches, it's because the feed dogs are slipping on this nylon and not pulling it through. I also like to increase my stitch length slightly when I'm working on this kind of thing because I've got a heavy duty zipper and I've got the nylon, and it just doesn't need all the hole punches in it to be held securely together. But I use regular thread, I use a regular universal needle. If your machine is skipping stitches, you may want to switch to a micro sharp needle instead of a universal one. That may work better on some machines. On my machine, the universal one works fine. So it's a good idea to get a sample of the fabric and do some stitching on it first before you start making your project, just to make sure that you've got the settings right for your machine. So I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to stitch all along these tabs, all along the zipper, and then I will meet you back here at the camera and show you what this looks like, and we can move on to the next step. Okay, so once this is stitched, this is what it looks like. You'll notice the little tab looks like it's not wide enough for the zipper, but that's just because this pull is pushing it out of the way. So our next step is actually to unzip the zipper slightly, and then we need to line up the zipper and baste this edge of the fabric to the other side of the zipper tab. Okay, you can see now that I've basted along the edge here, and now the zipper can be zipped shut right up to that piece of fabric. So the next thing we need to do is we need to fold our zipper in half, making sure that the tab on that side comes up too. And we're going to stitch right across this end. So match up that little tab seam and then just stitch right across with the 1/2 inch seam allowance so that we can make this into a loop. Okay, you can see that I have stitched this together along the ends here. What that means is I now have a loop. And what I'm going to do with that loop is I am going to now attach it to the top of the packing cube. So I've got the mesh fabric with the vinyl side down, and my loop is wrong side out, and I'm going to put my vinyl mesh inside my loop here. And my goal is that I want one of these back corners to match up close to the zipper there. So here's how I'm going to want my loop oriented. And now I can start pinning these together. I am going to caution though, especially with the vinyl, when you poke a pinhole in it, it doesn't recover. So you do want to try to make sure that you are keeping your pins in the seam allowance here. This is not how I would normally pin, but this is how I'm going to pin for this purpose so that I can hold the things together and keep all the pin pricks where the needle's going to sew anyway. So again, I'm pinning the rough edge of the mesh to the right side of the zipper. Okay, once that is all pinned in place, I am going to be stitching around that outer edge. I am going to use a zipper foot, and I'm going to make sure not to stitch over any of these pins. I'm going to have to stop and pull each one before I stitch. Okay, so I've stitched all around the edges here of the zipper, and we can take a peek now at what this is going to look right side out. You can see it starting to take shape, kind of like a mini suitcase. So I am going to mention though, if you travel a whole lot, you anticipate yourself using this a whole lot, and you really like to seam finish or reinforce things, you can add a step here that I'm not going to do, but I'll show you how. You can bias bind this seam. So what you need for that is double fold bias tape. And what you would do is you would go all around this, you would open up your bias tape, and you would stitch in the fold there all around this seam you just made. And then you would come back and you would fold it around the edge of the seam and then stitch again to catch that other edge. So these raw edges would be covered, and it would make it a little more sturdy because you're stitching it again. That's completely optional step though. I don't feel like I use this quite enough to necessitate that step. I travel, 4 or 5 times a year, not like every week or every month. So on this end, since it's a little less structured and floppy because of that zipper, I like to go ahead and mark the quarters of my base and then match those up. And you can honestly do this on the step with the zipper too. I just didn't feel like it's as necessary because that zipper is pretty structured, so it kind of holds everything in place. And also the vinyl side is not nearly as floppy as this side. So you mark the quarters of this, and then you're going to mark the quarters of the side and then match those two things together. So I usually start by matching where I sewed those zipper tabs on to find the center back. So if you fold it on that center back line, then match that up in the front. And then same thing for the sides. Make sure your center front and your center back pin are together, and then come on over and mark the sides. Before you start pinning, make sure that you have unzipped one of those zippers, at least partially. And then you just match your pins. Now because I don't have vinyl on this side, I am placing my pins perpendicular to the raw edge, and that shouldn't be a problem. Other than sometimes pins don't want to go in ripstop nylon very easily, so you may have to adjust where you're pinning. And then remember that this is supposed to match at the seam allowance, not at the edges. So it may look funky, like you're going to have these crumpled up looking corners, but when you stitch around them at the seam allowance, they're going to match. So at the very top edge here, you can see I've got wrinkles, but then those wrinkles disappear by the seam allowance, so I'm not going to have an issue. Alright, and now you're just going to stitch around that seam. So after you've sewn all around the edges, this is what the case looks like. And just like I mentioned on the zipper side, if you'd like, you can bias bind this seam just to make sure there's no raw edges and also to make it a little sturdier. I, however, going to skip that step, and I'm just going to find my zipper opening, and now you can turn the whole thing right side out through the zipper. There we go, voila! I've got a packing cube. I hope you've enjoyed this project today, and I hope you'll give it a try.